So we have another easy question this morning, right? Is Christianity too narrow? Is Christianity too strict? And I want to start by asking, did you have I'm sure most of you had rules growing up, right? But is there one or two rules that you had growing up as a kid that just, it sticks in your brain? For whatever reason, it just kind of sticks in your brain. Something as a kid growing up in your family, like things you weren't allowed to do or you had to do things a certain way. I'll start, and then I'd like a couple of you to, be brave enough to talk. And it's probably for all of you, elbows on the table, right? How many of you were allowed to put your elbows on the table? Savages. Not only were we not allowed, but we were physically accosted if we put my papa and my grandma. I've talked to you about my grandma before. She was 4'11". She's with the Lord now. And she was like a ninja with a lot of different things. And if our elbows were on the table, out of nowhere, she would stab us with a fork in our elbow. I have scars. You can't see them because I'm wearing sleeves. But she would, all of a sudden, if our elbows were on the table, even the slightest bit, boom! Now, it wasn't like a butcher's knife. It wasn't like we didn't become amputees. But, it was stabbed on with a fork in our elbow. And there's not too many of them. I think my cousin needed a constant reminder, and that's okay. But, after the third or fourth time, you kind of didn't do it anymore because it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth the pain and physical and mental toil of putting your elbows on the table. But what about you? Growing up, did you have one that, you remember that maybe you've passed on to your kids? Yeah, in the back. No riding your bike on Sunday. Oh, Satan would rejoice if you would get that helmet on and would ride on that bike. Interesting. No riding bikes on Sunday. Okay. What? No swimming? Period? Oh, okay. All right. That's others. Yeah, over here. No football on Sunday, and you had to keep your Sunday clothes on. I don't know which is worse. Leaving, not being able, or not playing football, or having to keep those clothes on. I don't know about you, but 10 minutes after I get home, I love a good pair of sweatpants. And, that was not... Okay, others. Any more? Yeah. You couldn't play with devil cards. Okay, I'm assuming that's just any deck, not like tarot cards or anything, because those truly are. But, no, regular cards. Interesting. And so we have these traditions and we have these rules. And what's interesting is a lot of you remember those 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. Because in some way, shape, or form, they've been burned into your conscience, burned into your spirit of something you didn't do. Now, what about a crazy family tradition? So not rules, but traditions that you had as a family. I'll give one. For 37 years, my mom's side of the family's done what we call a grab bag Christmas. Now, I'm going to describe what that is. And you're all going to think I'm a crazy person, but that's okay, and that's something that we'll get to. Three things come to mind when our family would do a grab bag Christmas. The first thing was we always had White Castles. Don't judge me. Yeah, we had White Castles. Yeah, and they're wonderful. We went to the one on 95th and Cicero because it was amazing, and we would always eat White Castles. And part of it was, it was a big family and it grew, and we all had different names. And you guys know grab bag, you get different names. But there was a felt box, so a box that had felt on it that was the special box that if you received the box, there was a scroll in there that you had to sign your name and your date on. We don't know what's going to happen when we're done with this and whoever lands on it, or ends up keeping it. But I remember one year my aunt she got it the year before, and she forgot to wrap it and give it. And we rode her for a year, constantly reminding her. I don't care if it was me that was doing it, but constantly reminding her that she screwed up the family in some way because she did not wrap the felt box. And then this one, I don't know why even I'm telling you this, but after the giving and receiving of gifts, we would have a giant wrapping paper war. Like, as people were wrapping their or unwrapping their gifts, right? So Darrell, if you were like in my family, like you'd be wrapping your gift and we'd all like fake that we cared what she got. But as she would unwrap, we would steal her wrapping paper. Like she would, like all of a sudden a piece would go, and like we'd take it. And then afterwards, we literally all just had a giant wrapping paper war, throwing it. Like I remember like all those years of aggression at like my grandparents, like I just whipped this and they'd whip it back. I understand I may not have a job next week, and that's fine. I've loved you guys for 5 months, but that was like Merry Christmas from the Well family, and we wouldn't stop until someone got hurt. And so it was like Fight Club meets Christmas. And so verbalizing it out loud, it definitely makes me sound like a crazy person. But did any of you have like crazy traditions and you don't know why you still do them, but you do them? Anybody? Yeah. Don't ask grandma for anything in life until after Christmas. Don't you dare talk to grandma until after. Your grandma was brilliant that she got you to believe that you couldn't ask her for anything, right? In that one time of year. Others? Any just family traditions? Yeah, over here. You had an ugly green box. Did anything ever come of it? It eventually fell apart, and so did that family tradition. But no, yeah, just like the felt box, absolutely. Any others? One or two more? Yeah, up there. A tinfoil. So that's like wrapping paper, but worse. Like, because that can cut you. Like, that's, wow. Wow. Did you like all go get tetanus shots afterwards? Was that part of, no? Like, wow, tinfoil. Like, is someone else be like, oh, we threw bricks? No, please, no, we didn't. That's fine. But we have these crazy traditions. It comes to mind, Randy, how long ago was the last green box? When did that make its last appearance? Till the early 90s. Yeah, you're... Okay, but yet in 2019, it still comes to mind. Because there's something about us, innate in us, that like if it didn't happen... Like, we rode my Aunt Debbie for a year because we like acted like she screwed up, grabbed at Christmas because she didn't do the felt box. Like, we can talk about that honestly and be like, I think you may need family therapy if you rode her for a year because she didn't wrap a box. But we attach to these things. We have these things growing up. And it's interesting not only why we do these things, but what's even more interesting to me is what happens when we stop doing them. Like the wrapping paper war for my family or the, malleable steel war that your family had up there. Like at some point you stop doing them and there's almost like a void. I think the last two grab bags, I don't think they've done it. And it's like awkward. Like we're all sitting there like, well, what do we do? And it's what happens when we don't do these traditions. Now, for anyone that grew up in the church, for any sort of time, you may have had similar traditions. And I'm not going to say these in jest, because church traditions are wonderful and beautiful, and some church traditions are insane and make absolutely no sense. We need to own that this morning, right? Just because you did something growing up and always did it, A, didn't make it right, B, didn't make it impactful, and C, may have had no value to it whatsoever. On the flip side, some of it did, right? So my dad's side of the family all grew up Catholic on the south side of Chicago. And I remember going to Catholic masses growing up. And one thing I noticed, and again, I am not by any means poking fun at this, but a lot of my Catholic family, right, before you say a prayer or after you say a prayer, what do? You cross yourself, and you better cross the right way. There's a right way to cross and a wrong way to cross. And I remember talking to my grandma about that, and in her mind, and I can't wait to see her again because she believed Christ was the way, and, but she was a devout Catholic in the way that she reflected on some of that, and again, I can't wait to see her again in heaven. She died in the late 90s. She said it centered her on the prayer. She said, God, bless my mind and bless all the distractions around me as I go to you in prayer, that they would not be there. And so that took a new spin on that for me, but that's something, I remember doing weddings. If I do a wedding and I get ready to pray in a ceremony and there's, some Catholic family there, you say, let's pray, they do it, amen, they do it. That is just something that's there. Or one thing with my dad's side of the family was the kneeler. And now maybe you grew up even in a Protestant church that had kneelers, but at certain times you stood, certain times you sat, certain times you kneeled. It was kind of like arms, shoulders, knees, and toes. It just felt a little strange going through all of that. And then all of a sudden, if the congregation got a little too old, the church said, no, we're not going to do kneelers anymore because they can't get up from them. And so there were these different things that we did for whatever reason. The church I grew up in Oak Lawn, it was kind of a covenant Swedish church. We did the same liturgy every week. Every week, out of the same 2 pages in our book. By the time I was in 3rd or 4th grade, I had it memorized because I could pay attention for 1 second and get it, and every week it was the same. And I know for a lot of you grew up reading the 10 Commandments every week on Sunday. Again, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong at all with centering on the law. We do it before communion, and we bring it in throughout different parts of the sermons. But one of the things growing up that I remember was Sunday school. We actually got graduation pins when you graduated Sunday school. Anyone else get pins? Thank you. Oh, I thought I was going to be the only one. We actually got like these pins, and it looked like train tracks that would go down. And I remember like bragging to friends, like, you see my pin? Like, it's for perfect attendance in Sunday school. You see, you're laughing, and and that it wasn't a joke to me, because it's like, yeah, look at my perfect attendance in Sunday school pin, and it was, you always, another thing we did on rally day, which pretty sure was made up, we would tie balloons with our name and address on it, and we'd let the balloons go in Oak Lawn, Illinois, and then later in the year, we would get an award of whoever's traveled the farthest. And I won one year. I was in 5th grade, I think, and mine made it to, I think it was Griffith, Indiana. My balloon made it to Griffith. I say that now, and I feel like Homeland Security would be called for a church doing this, because all of a sudden this balloon would float in or pop and fall in their yard, and there'd be someone's contact information lying in your backyard. But we did it every year out of tradition. And I think back on these, and I go, why in the world did we do this? But if we're honest, even not just in church, but in our lives, we have just habitual traditions that we do. We don't even think about it. And so a definition of habitual is doing the same thing without thought, understanding, or emphasis. The world's filled with them, the church is filled with them, right? Look at Super Bowl parties. If you don't go to a Super Bowl party, you may think your year's toast, because it's just something you always did. And so we ask these questions, and now in 2019, I look back on a lot of these and go, okay, when we stopped doing them as a family, my world didn't fall apart. I saved myself some embarrassment from our grab bag Christmas getting pounded with wrapping paper. But the real question is, are they important? Our habitual traditions in the church, outside of the church, are they really important? And for some of us, yes, they have to be. It's where I find my identity is by doing these things. Growing up, getting the perfect attendance pin really, grew me in the church. Yet when I was in high school and I had the opportunity to not be in the church, I took it. Yeah, I had the perfect attendance pin through 5th grade, but once I was able to kind of make that choice, poof, I was gone. So really, perfect attendance in Sunday school didn't really make the kind of impact that maybe the people that planned to do that thought or hoped it would. But things seemed to change. And we root all of this stuff. If we're honest, and we're going to, again, I'm asking that you are, we're rooting a lot of these tradition in the religion side of our beliefs. The religiosity, if you will, of how we walk out our belief system. Whether you grew up in the Reformed Church, the Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church, the Baptist Church, or not church, we are rooted all of these things in tradition, and usually we root this in religion for one of 3 ways, or one of 3 reasons. To please someone or something, or please ourselves. To keep the status quo without any defilement, right? In order to get the pin, you had to go to Sunday school. Or it helps the person farther down some kind of spiritual plane. We actually attach value and worth and spirituality to some of these traditions because we think by doing them, we're going to kind of go down further along in our spiritual walk or on some kind of spiritual plane with some kind of supernatural destination. If we're honest and we break this down, that's why we do what we did growing up and maybe things that we still do. So if we lay our traditions and we lay our religion side of that on one thing, what is it all rooted in? Think about it. For a cup of coffee and a conversation with Pastor Jim, all of these religions and traditions that we kind of build up, they're all based on what? Tradition, okay? But these traditions are based on what? In order to have a tradition, you have to keep doing them for a reason, or else you're just a crazy person, right? Why? Or what are they based on? Okay, close. We're in the door. You have the cup of coffee, or you have the cup, but there's no coffee in it. Why ultimately, when we break it down, why do we do these? What? Oh, so close. The waitress is there. She's ready to go. It's all about us. If we honestly think about those, a lot of those traditions, a lot habitual or not, and a lot of that religion side of it is based on us. Our moving further along, our getting the pin, our doing this, our doing that. It's all based on us. So let me ask, how does that make you feel? Knowing a number of you grew up in the church, and some of you haven't, but a number of you did, that if I'm going to say a lot of those traditions, a lot of that religiosity stuff was based on you, how does that make you feel? Insecure. Selfish? Interesting. Foolish. Well, you're all really attaching to it, which is good. That was my hope. I was thinking, I'm like, anger, you're fired, all of those things. I was waiting for some of that, because if we are, and I appreciate you being honest, we really make that religion and those traditions about us. Why? Well, if we remember from last week, because with creation, with sin entering the world was not about God. Sin entering the world was about us. We did it. We love to blame God for it, a lot like Adam and Eve did, but we are the ones that ushered it in. A belief system that has a foundation in what we do, in do's and don'ts, or maybe kind of do, always trying to climb some kind of checklist ladder, is all about us. And here's the thing, every religion in the world has a foundation in that. Every. I don't care if it's Christianity, I don't care if it's Buddhism, I don't care if it's Hinduism, I don't care if it's atheism or the New Ageism that's been out over the last 30, 40 years. It's all based on a checklist of do's and don'ts based on what we do. And that's what we're talking about this morning. Every religion in the world. Some would say that's what Christianity is all about. And in some ways, there's truth to that. In some ways, it is. Not in the true way Christianity was developed. We're going to talk about that. But in a way that we've commoditized it, you better believe it is. It is a checklist of do's and don'ts. That is why I believe question number 4 of this series is, why is Christianity too narrow or too strict? Because it's based on our experiences. It's based on what we want it to be. And again, we're building on this, right? So let's review really quick. All right, 7 weeks, I asked you, anybody here to believe there is a God for 7 weeks. 6 weeks to believe that He created you. 5 weeks to believe He is sovereign, meaning in control, even in the good times and the bad. And now this week, for 4 weeks, I want you to believe that Christianity, the true understanding of Christianity, is the foundation of how we ought to live our lives. I'll back that up today. We're going to break down why that is. But when we base things on our experiences, that means it's based on ourselves or someone else's perception or interpretation of what we did do or didn't do, upholding some kind of country club law or do in order to have good standing with something. Every religion in the world is based on that. It is. You can go and read even the one where it's all about clearing your mind and having nirvana. It is based on that, rooted in some kind of understanding of knowledge. So we open up today, Acts 17. It's a little bit longer of a text, so just listen. This is when Paul now, so Saul converted to Paul. We'll talk about that in a minute. He's in Athens. Athens is the center of the philosophical and knowledge of the world, right? The smartest people, right, come from Athens, if you will. And now it writes, now Paul was in Athens while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, his spirit was provoked with him, and he saw that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue and with the Jews and the devout persons, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Some were Epicureans, some were Stoic philosophers, also conversed with him. And some said, what does this babbler wish to say? Others said, he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities, because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting, for you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean. Now all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling and hearing about something new. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For I have passed along and observed the objects of your worship. I have found also an altar with the inscription, to the unknown God. And therefore you worship as unknown. This I proclaim to you, that God, who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man. Nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives all mankind life and breath and everything. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live all on the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and boundaries for their dwelling place, and that they should seek God, and perhaps their way towards him and find him. Yet he actually not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of the poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. Being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of man. The times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man who he has appointed. And this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. Whew. Okay, how many of you would have given the same answer? So Paul, very bright, let's go back and talk. Let's break it down for 30 seconds, right? Paul, originally named Saul, historical person, grew up in a place called Tarsus, known for their library. It was a real place historically. You can find it on a map. He grew up in an educated Jewish system. He was very smart. He was a young guy, top of his class. He was on the road of becoming a high-ranking Pharisee, which was a religious leader of that time. So Saul was on that road. His belief system was built on a couple things: education, knowledge, and the law. The do's and don'ts over the year became wrapped up in individual power, corruption, and built upon money and political definition and acceptance. What does that sound like today? That's not anything new, right? That kind of understanding of corruption and law built upon money and political definition. I think we're going through it today, right? You turn on the news for 30 seconds and you'll see it. Now, some of you today may have some of the same reasons why you wouldn't even touch Christianity, because you've based it in those same things. And in order to understand what Christianity truly is, we have to break down what it is not. What Paul grew up in, what Paul wanted to believe, the do's, the don'ts, the law, all of that, as Saul, right? That wasn't it. That is not what Christianity is. I will go to the mat for that. Saul's understanding is not what Christianity is. Understand that Saul's religion was not Christianity. Saul's religion, even his understanding of the Jewish law, wasn't the correct understanding from the Old Testament. They had wrapped it up in all of this other stuff. But what's funny is Saul had a conversion. He met the resurrected Jesus on the road to Damascus and was changed. Something turned in him, from all the corruption, the do's and don'ts for personal gain, all of that changed. We're going to get there in a couple minutes, but let's break down the text. Paul's in Athens, right? Very smart area. Known for their philosophy, knowledge, political, spiritual, conversational thought. Literally, you had a group of people, all they wanted to do was debate. They came to the town square, the Areopagus, and they all debated. But Paul's there noticing something. What does he notice? He notices all the idols, right? So all of these smarter than smart philosophers, just kind of college row, yet all there is idols. Idols for everything. Gods, little g, for everything. So even the smartest of the smart, even the most intelligent of the intelligent, still worshipped. Isn't that interesting? They had all the knowledge in the world, right? They had all the answers. They had all of that. And they prided themselves in having all the answers, yet they still worshipped gods. They still had a religious system. And Paul notices something different. Paul notices that there's an unknown God. They have gods for everything. Unknown God. And something clicks for him, and the Holy Spirit works in him. Why do you think they had all these gods? Because worship, friends, is in our DNA. If you remember from last week and 2 weeks ago, when we were created creator-creation. And so there's a relationship there. There is an attachment there. There's an attraction there to worship. And if we're truly honest with ourselves today, in 2019, no matter where we are in life, we have that same attraction to worship. But the question becomes, what or who are you worshiping? And so Paul gives that long response to them wanting to know, hey, what is this new thing? Paul is saying, it's not new. This is the foundation of the world. Even the most atheist of atheists, something deep down inside of them still longs to worship. But at the end of the day, they worship themselves. I mean, if you're not going to believe that there's a higher power, you do not believe in an afterlife, you do not do any of that, then at the end of the day, that longing to please is in ourselves. You can't really deny it because it's the way we live our life. It's the way people move and have their being. In some way, shape, or form, we worship ourselves. And why? Because we all want to still live in order, right? None of us likes to live in chaos. Let's think about the most stressful day you had in the last month. Maybe in that stressful day, you wanted to do a couple things. Maybe you wanted to quit your job. Maybe you wanted to end a relationship. Maybe you wanted to mow down your enemy. Maybe you wanted to hide from your kids. Maybe you wanted to leave the dog outside to freeze to death. Maybe you wanted to fake your own death and move to Istanbul. Whatever it was that you wanted to kind of break away from your stressful day, how do you do in chaos? We don't do well in chaos. Anyone says, oh no, I just need that. I just need to have stress in my life. I need to be so stressed because then I know what needs to get done and what doesn't need to get done. I just want to go up to them and give them a hug and say, you sound like a crazy person. Because we don't long for stress. If we are honest with ourselves, the most stressful of days, the most chaotic of days, it doesn't work for us. A little story from the Hollendowners. If my wife and I, we need probably 2 or 3 evenings where her and I can just sit on the couch, the boys are in bed, sit on the couch, maybe watch a show, talk, whatever it is. If we don't have that, if like every night we have to be somewhere else, we are exhausted because we can't just sit and just be. Because the chaos of life can be too much. And my guess is you're very similar. That in every other, when the day is chaotic, things seem to be out of control, we have this feeling like we need to be rescued. We have this longing that somebody comes and makes it stress-free to let us escape from the chaos of life. Guys, Christianity is no different. Neither is any other world religion. I don't care what world religion you want to buy into this morning, but on the day that you have stress, Hindus have stress, Buddhists have stress, Muslims have stress, Christians have stress, atheists have stress, agnostics have stress, Scientology has stress. All of those days are stressful. It's just where we are in life. We all long for something to change, for a rescue from those chaotic days. Let me just say that in every other world of religion, those kind of days usually mean that you did something wrong. If we're going to base down belief systems and break them apart this morning to understand, when you have days like that, it's attributed to you doing something wrong, said something wrong, thought something wrong, and have this understanding that you need to do something different to have a better day. That there's this kind of like bartering system. You do good, good things happen. You do bad, bad things happen. One world religion calls it karma. But every other world religion in the world has a definition for it. How does that make you feel? You do something wrong, something bad happens to you. For a Christian, that puts us in a pretty weird spot. Why? Especially as Reformed believers, the first thing we start with is we're depraved. Great. So we're depraved, and if this is some kind of like good, bad bartering system, that means every day is going to be bad. So does that help? Does that make you ever feel better? That your actions determine what kind of day you're going to have? I want to quit my job. Well, it's probably because you stink at it and you have sin in your life. I want to end that relationship. Well, you're probably not worth it anyway. I want to mow down my enemy. That's because you're an evil person and you probably are a bad driver. I want to hide from my kids. That's probably because you're a bad parent and did something wrong. I want to leave my dog outside. Well, that one's just different. I don't really like my dog. But I want to fake my own death. That's probably because no one really loves you. There's this understanding in other world religions that attach that way. And if we make Christianity about a religiosity of do's and don'ts, friends, it sneaks in there just the same. That we then start to whip our back, we start to beat, we try to figure out what we can do. So now this morning, I'm sure we're all feeling awesome and super encouraged. But if we're going to have this honest dialogue, that's what the system of religiosity is rooted in. And I don't care what religion you're talking about. What you do determines what you get, or don't do and don't get. It's this trade-off. How in the world can any of us feel comfortable in that? How in the world can any of us have joy or sing something like Amazing Grace? It doesn't make any sense. I have in here. So now that everyone is feeling awesome or super offended, let's keep going. So let me point out as we close how religion, no matter what kind it is, no matter what the name is, that's ultimately how it engages you, because you're not good enough. Even the religion that Saul the Pharisee was learning and living out was the same thing. So it would make sense to worship ourselves at that point, right? If we wanted to escape all the world religions, it would make sense to worship ourselves. It would make sense then putting our trust in Buddha or Nirvana or the Jewish law or Madonna or Tom Cruise and his witchcraft. All of those things wouldn't make any sense to us. So why would we want to worship them? We'd want to worship ourselves. We're going to place ourselves on that super spiritual plane that we decide how that works. I don't know about you, but that makes me uncomfortable because I know the kind of person I am. If I was perfect, absolutely build a religion on me. You know, what would Jim do? I get that, friends. I'm not perfect. So please don't. Please don't. Because when push comes to shove, all of those religions are about what you are bringing to the table. But how does that feel if you're struggling in life? How does that feel if you're lonely, if you're bitter or afraid, stressed out, worn out, or weak? How does it help any of those people when it's just, well, live better? Hey, you're struggling, live a better life. I can't. Well, just live differently. I don't know how. Well, just pray more. Well, I don't get it. Well, just give more money. I can't. Friends, when our salvation is based on us, we come up dry all the time. When any other world religion tells you you have to do all of these things, we don't measure up. And that's a super depressing day. But try some of these on for size. Well, just rest in my presence, for I am with you. How about I'll never leave you nor forsake you? I will be with you until the very end of the age. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, and they don't know how to get through it. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. How do those sound? Not very religiosity-wise, not very religion-based. It's not based on what you're doing. I will be with you always to the very end of the age. If you do this, nope. Jesus stopped. I will be with you always to the very end of the age. And the peace of God, which surpasses all our understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. Nowhere in there does it have anything about what you do or don't do. What you can bring to the table, what you know, what you want to worship. Like Saul being converted to Paul, he was given a new name, a new purpose, a new perspective. The religiosity of Christianity is junk. Absolute junk. Hear that this morning. What Christianity is not about is a law based on what we do. It is a law based on grace. Grace to get through the day. Grace to reconcile hurt. Grace to forgive others. Grace to take a breath and re-engage. Grace to show compassion. Grace to look in the mirror knowing that you are not alone. It's not religion at all, my friends. It is about a grace-filled relationship with someone who has always been there and promises to always be there. But naturally, our hearts and our minds go, well, what do we have to do? Because we've been ingrained to do it, whether it's to steal Dorell's wrapping paper only to throw it at her, or in some kind of weird religious way to earn salvation. We've all been trained to do that. So we even ask God, how can you give this to me? What do I have to do to make this okay? But God answers us in Micah 6:8. He has told you, O man or woman, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? I love this. To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Think about it. This relationship asks that every one of you come every morning with the mindset, justice. How are you going to live out justice today? To love being merciful. What does that look like in your life? To walk through life putting others first. Friends, how would that change your perspective? So let me help you out this morning. Again, and I am right there with you in the struggles and trenches of life. This relationship with Christ, what Christianity is really about, to claim the idea of Christian or the label of Christian, literally translated means little Christ. How do we live that out in life? One simple change. And it's a mindset, it's the way we talk, it's the way we believe in our hearts. We change the I have to's to the I get to's. So what does that look like? The do's and don'ts the do's and don'ts aren't there because it's about what we get to do. Because you are no longer living for yourself, but Christ's love is living through you, and He's asking how to live that out for others. We do it because we get to do it. Friends, I don't have to come to church. If you have that mindset that I have to come to church, don't. But I get to come to church. I get to worship. Not I have to worship. Oh, we have to sit through these 3 worship songs every Sunday. No, you get to sit through and you get to worship. Oh, I have to listen to this new guy all the time. No, you get to. And as a pastor, that one's really fun to say. You get to listen to me. But what about living it out? I get to love people. Oh, that coworker, that relationship that's so broken, I get to reconcile it. Because Christ has already done the work for you. You just get to do it. And really, what He's asking, and we're going to talk about this in a couple weeks, But what he's asking is that you live out this truth in love towards others. And he knows it's nothing what you're bringing to the table. It's everything for what he's already done. But more on that in a couple weeks.